Welcome to Alien Whisper, where sizzling hot alien women and emotional sci-fi alien stories await you. If you enjoy thrilling adventures between humans and extraterrestrial beings, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below the video. Now, let's dive into the story. He thought he was just cataloging alien trees, until a sinkhole swallowed his rover and something ancient, something alive, stared back from the shadows. Now, a wounded creature clings to him with glowing eyes and impossible intelligence. And when he carries it home, the bond they form begins to change everything. His body, his mind, and maybe his destiny. The storm roared across the glowing forests of Aethon, a wild symphony of howling winds and distant thunder that shook the very air. Captain Aiden Thorne stood at the observation window of the research outpost, his sharp hazel eyes tracking the jagged bolts of lightning as they tore through the deep purple sky. The electric flashes lit up the alien landscape below, twisted rock formations and bioluminescent trees swaying violently under the tempest's fury. For 3 months, Aiden and his team had been stationed on this remote planet, cataloging its flora and fauna for Earth's Interstellar Exploration Initiative. Tonight, though, something felt off, a gut instinct he couldn't shake. "Sir, you need to see this," crackled Specialist Mara Chiver's voice through the comm system, her tone tight with unease. Seismic readings in Sector 7 are spiking hard. Aiden didn't turn from the window, his jaw tightening as he processed her words. Natural or man-made? No clue yet, but it's triggering a massive sinkhole about 2 kilometers north. He grabbed his environmental suit from the rack, his movements quick and decisive. "Prep the rover. We're heading out." "But sir, the storm," Mara started, her voice rising in protest. "I know the risks." Aiden cut her off, already sealing his helmet with a hiss of pressurized air. "Whatever's happening out there won't wait for clear skies." 20 minutes later, the rover jolted across Aethon's rugged terrain, its reinforced hull shuddering against the pounding sheets of acidic rain. The storm had worsened, the wind screaming like a living thing, hurling debris against the vehicle's protective shell. Mara, strapped into the co-pilot's seat, pointed ahead through the windshield, her gloved hand trembling slightly. There, a massive sinkhole yawned open in the ground, at least 50 meters wide, its edges jagged and unstable. The rover's headlights sliced through the darkness, catching glints of something shimmering deep within the pit. "What the hell is that?" Aiden muttered, easing the rover to a stop at a safe distance. "Some kind of structure?" Mara ventured, squinting through the rain-streaked glass. "Ancient tech, maybe?" "Only one way to find out." Aiden unbuckled his harness and checked his suit's seals. "Tether up. We're going in." They descended cautiously, their boots crunching against loose gravel as they rappelled into the hole, safety lines anchored to the rover above. The deeper they went, the more the storm's roar faded, replaced by an eerie stillness. The walls of the chamber they entered gleamed like polished obsidian, but a faint, pulsing glow emanated from within the material, casting strange shadows across the space. "Holy shit," Mara whispered, her breath fogging her visor. "This is beyond anything we've logged so far." Aiden nodded, his pulse quickening as he scanned the chamber. The air smelled faintly of ozone and something sweet, like overripe fruit, an alien scent that set his nerves on edge. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he caught movement. Something small darted in the shadows near the far wall, no bigger than his hand. He stepped closer, his boots echoing softly on the smooth floor, and crouched down to get a better look. It was a creature, tiny, fragile-looking, with shimmering teal fur that seemed to glow faintly in the dim light. Its ice-blue eyes, wide and piercing, locked onto his, radiating an unsettling intelligence. A thin trail of luminescent fluid leaked from a gash on its flank, pooling on the ground like liquid starlight. "What is that thing?" Mara asked, reaching for her scanner with a mix of awe and caution. Before Aiden could respond, the ground beneath them trembled violently, a low rumble building into a deafening groan. Dust and debris rained from the ceiling as the chamber began to collapse. "We need to move now," Aiden shouted, grabbing Mara's arm to pull her back toward the ropes. But as he turned, those glowing blue eyes caught him again, rooting him in place. The creature didn't move, didn't flee, just stared, its gaze pleading, almost human. Against every ounce of logic screaming in his head, Aiden acted on instinct. He scooped the tiny thing up, its body light and trembling in his hands, and tucked it into the specimen pouch on his suit. "Sir, what are you?" Mara started, but the words were drowned out by a thunderous crack as the chamber's walls buckled. They scrambled up the ropes, the sinkhole collapsing behind them in a cascade of rock and dust. The shockwave hit just as they reached the rover, nearly flipping the vehicle as Aiden gunned the engine and sped back toward the outpost. His heart pounded in his chest, the creature's faint warmth pressing against him through the pouch. Back at base, the science team buzzed with excitement, crowding around the command center as Aiden and Mara stumbled in, soaked and breathless. "We got something alive down there," one of the techs called out, eyes wide with anticipation. "Let's get it to the lab." But Aiden held up a hand, his voice firm despite the adrenaline still coursing through him. "Not yet. It's injured. It needs medical attention first." The room went quiet. A few skeptical glances exchanged among the team. Mara stepped forward, her brow furrowed. "Sir, with all due respect, we don't even know what it is. It could be dangerous, or carrying something we can't handle." "I get that," Aiden said, meeting her gaze evenly. "But it's hurt and it's my call. I'll take it to my quarters and stabilize it. Then we'll figure out the next step." Mara opened her mouth to argue, then sighed and backed off, clearly unconvinced. Aiden didn't wait for more pushback. He turned and headed down the corridor to his small, Spartan room, the creature still nestled in his pouch. Inside, he locked the door and set up a makeshift station on his desk, a sterile cloth, antiseptic spray, and a few protein rations from his personal stash. Carefully, he lifted the creature out, its teal fur soft against his gloved fingers. Up close, it was even more striking, its fur catching the light like a prism, shifting hues with every movement. Those ice blue eyes followed him, calm now, no longer afraid. "Okay, little guy," Aiden murmured, his voice softening as he sprayed antiseptic over the gash. "Let's get you patched up." The creature flinched at the first touch, but didn't resist, letting him clean the wound and dab it with a sealant gel. When he offered a small chunk of protein bar, it hesitated, then nibbled at it, its tiny teeth surprisingly sharp. Aiden watched, a strange warmth spreading through him, a mix of curiosity and something deeper, almost protective. "What are you?" he asked aloud, leaning back in his chair as the creature curled up on the cloth, its glow dimming slightly as it relaxed. "And why do I feel like I was meant to find you?" He stripped off his suit, exhaustion tugging at his bones, and collapsed onto his bunk. The storm still raged outside, a dull roar through the outpost's thick walls. As he drifted toward sleep, he felt a faint shift, the creature moving closer, climbing onto his pillow and pressing its small, warm body against his neck. Its heartbeat pulsed against his skin, fast but steady, syncing with his own in a way that felt oddly comforting. In his dreams that night, images flickered like a broken holofilm. A vast civilization of green-skinned beings with silver hair, towering temples carved from living crystal, and massive creatures with glowing teal fur standing guard over it all. The scenes were vivid, alien, and yet somehow familiar, as if they'd been buried in his mind all along. When he woke, the storm had quieted to a low hum, and the creature, Lumina, he decided to call it, for the way it shone, was staring at him. Its eyes held a depth he couldn't explain, a silent understanding that sent a shiver down his spine. Aiden sat up slowly, running a hand through his dark, tousled hair. "Guess we're in this together now." "Huh," he said, a faint grin tugging at his lips. Over the next few days, Lumina's growth was nothing short of miraculous. What had fit in his palm now stood knee-high, its delicate frame filling out with lean muscle beneath that radiant teal coat. Aiden logged its progress meticulously, noting every change in his personal datapad. Up 2 kilos since last week, he recorded, his voice steady but tinged with awe. Lumina watched him, tilting its head as if it understood every word. The expedition leaders have been surprisingly lenient about Aiden keeping it, mostly because Lumina showed no aggression toward humans and seemed glued to his side. But not everyone was on board. Mara, ever the skeptic, cornered him in the mess hall one evening, her arms crossed and her tone sharp. "Sir, I'm not trying to step on your toes, but we need to talk about that thing," she said, jerking her chin toward Lumina, who sat quietly at Aiden's feet. "It's growing fast, too fast. What happens if it turns on us?" Aiden took a sip of his coffee, keeping his expression neutral. "It won't. I can feel it, Mara. There's a connection here, something I can't explain yet." "That's the problem," she shot back. "You're letting feelings cloud your judgment. We're scientists, not pet keepers. If it gets out of hand, this whole outpost could be at risk." "I hear you," Aiden said, setting his mug down with a soft clink. "But look at it. Does it look like a threat to you?" Mara glanced at Lumina, its glowing fur casting a soft light across the floor, and hesitated. "Not now, maybe, but what about tomorrow? Or next week?" "I'll take responsibility," Aiden replied, his voice firm. "If it goes south, it's on me. But I'm not locking it up or handing it over until I know what it is and what it needs." She shook her head, frustration etching lines into her face, but didn't press further. The tension hung between them, a quiet rift forming in the team. Aiden knew he'd have to prove himself soon, not just to Mara, but to everyone. Lumina wasn't just some anomaly to dissect. It was something more, something tied to him in ways he was only beginning to grasp. That night, as he lay in his bunk with Lumina curled beside him, its glow a comforting beacon in the dark, he felt it again, that faint brush of its mind against his, a whisper of alien thoughts he couldn't quite catch. Whatever Lumina was, wherever it came from, Aiden was sure of one thing. His life, and maybe more, had just taken a turn he'd never expected. The shuttle vibrated as it sliced through Zorath's atmosphere, the engines roaring like a beast unleashed. Captain Aiden Thorne sat in the co-pilot's seat, his eyes locked on the observation window, where the planet unfolded like a living painting. Vast emerald forests stretched to the horizon, dotted with crystalline structures that seemed to grow from the earth, their surfaces shimmering with a life of their own. The air carried an alien scent, sweet and slightly tangy, like citrus mixed with fresh rain on hot pavement. Lumina, now nearly waist-high, sat beside him, its teal fur glowing softly in the strange sunlight, its ice-blue eyes scanning the landscape with sharp intelligence. Approaching landing coordinates, Lieutenant Jackson, the young pilot, announced, his voice steady despite the awe in his eyes. "Zorath Control has cleared us to land." Aiden nodded, his mind buzzing with anticipation. Since finding Lumina on Aethon, his life had been swept into a current of mystery and purpose. Now he was about to step onto a new world, one where his bond with this creature might hold deeper meaning, a world that could change everything he thought he knew about himself and his place in the cosmos. The shuttle touched down on a platform carved into a towering cliff, its surface smooth and organic, as if it had been born rather than built. As the hatch opened, a wave of warm, fragrant air rushed in, carrying distant sounds of Zorath's life. Chimes like wind through glass, rhythmic songs, and the low hum of machinery that felt almost alive. A delegation awaited them on the platform, their silhouettes stark against the golden glow of twin suns. At their head stood a figure who could only be Princess Lyra. She was tall, even by human standards, with pearlescent skin that shifted subtly as she moved, catching the light like a polished gem. Her silver hair cascaded over her shoulders, glinting like liquid mercury, and her eyes, deep violet, piercing, radiated authority and curiosity. She wore armor that was both ceremonial and practical, forged from a living metal that flexed with her, adorned with intricate patterns that pulsed faintly. "Captain Thorne," she greeted, her voice rich and melodic, with a slight alien cadence that made her words feel like music. "I am Princess Lyra of Zorath. You have brought something of great importance to us." Aiden stepped forward, Lumina padding silently at his side. Princess Lyra, it's an honor. I found Lumina on Aethon. It was injured and I took care of it. I had no idea it belonged to your people. Lyra's gaze flicked to Lumina, then back to Aiden, her expression unreadable. A starbound, bonded to a human. This has no precedent. A murmur rippled through the delegation, a mix of surprise and skepticism. Aiden felt their eyes on him, sizing him up, judging. But he stood tall, resting a hand lightly on Lumina's back, feeling its warmth through his glove. I don't fully understand it myself, he admitted. But there's a connection between us I can't explain. Lyra studied him for a long moment. Then a small smile curved her lips. Perhaps there's more at play than we can see. Come, we'll discuss this in more comfortable surroundings. She turned, leading them toward a structure that seemed to rise organically from the platform, its walls smooth and glowing faintly from within. Inside, the air was cool and fragrant, filled with the scent of flowers Aiden couldn't name. The chamber was spacious, its furniture seemingly grown from the floor, seamless and alive. Lyra gestured for them to sit, and Aiden settled onto what felt like a living cushion, firm yet yielding. Let me first explain what Starbound is, Lyra began, her voice formal but warm. They're sacred creatures to us, born from the very essence of Zorath. Each Starbound bonds with a member of our royal line, forming a lifelong partnership that strengthens both. They are protectors, guides, and our connection to the heart of this planet. Aiden listened intently, his scientist's mind racing with questions. But why would Lumina bond with me? I'm not royalty, not even from your world. That's what makes this remarkable, Lyra said, leaning forward slightly. In all our history, a Starbound has never chosen an outsider. There must be something unique about you, Captain Thorne, something that resonates with Lumina on a profound level. Aiden glanced at Lumina, now curled beside his chair, eyes half closed but alert. I wish I knew what that was. All I did was help it when it was hurt. Perhaps that's enough, Lyra mused. Compassion, courage, the will to protect. Those are the qualities of a true companion. Maybe Lumina saw in you what it needed, regardless of tradition. There was a pause. Then Lyra's expression grew more serious. Not everyone will see it that way. However, there are those in our society who cling to tradition, who may view your bond as a threat to our way of life. Aiden nodded, catching her meaning. So there might be pushback. Indeed, Lyra confirmed. But I believe this could be an opportunity for change, for growth. Your presence here, and your bond with Lumina, might be the catalyst for something new. She rose, moving to a window that opened onto a sweeping view of the city. Zorath stands at a crossroads. Captain, our world faces challenges, both internal and external, that demand we adapt. Perhaps you're here to help us navigate that path. Aiden joined her at the window, taking in the city below. Crystal spires curved like vines, their surfaces alive with light. Streets shifted subtly to accommodate pedestrians, and public spaces brimmed with art and music that seemed to pulse with the planet's rhythm. It was a world unlike anything he'd ever seen, yet there was a harmony, a sense of balance that felt almost sacred. I'm just a scientist, princess, he said quietly. I don't know if I can be what you need. Lyra turned to him, her eyes searching his. Sometimes it's not about who we think we are, but who we can become. I believe you have the potential to be more than you realize. Their gazes locked for a moment, and Aiden felt a spark. Attraction, maybe, or just the thrill of the unknown. He cleared his throat, looking away. Well, I'm here to learn and help if I can. Lyra smiled again, warmer this time. That's all I ask. Over the next few hours, Lyra and a small escort led Aiden on a tour of the city. The architecture was breathtaking. Buildings that seemed to breathe, streets that adapted to foot traffic, and public spaces filled with art and music that harmonized with the planet's natural rhythm. At one point, they visited a sacred grove where other starbounds were kept. These creatures were massive, some as large as elephants, their fur glowing in a spectrum of colors, their eyes wise and ancient. Lumina perked up at the sight, letting out a low hum that was answered by the others. They recognize it, Lyra observed. Even young, they sense its strength. Aiden watched as Lumina approached a larger starbound, their fur brushing in what felt like a greeting. "It's incredible," he murmured. "I never imagined anything like this." But not all of Zorath was welcoming. As they passed through a bustling market, Aiden noticed some Zorathians eyeing him warily. A few whispered to each other, their voices sharp and distrustful. One group, dressed in more traditional garb, even blocked their path briefly. Their leader, a stern man with deep green skin, glared at Aiden with unveiled hostility. "Human," he spat, "you don't belong here. Return the starbound to us." Lyra stepped forward, her voice cutting like a blade. "Advisor Thorne, you overstep. Captain Thorne is our guest, and Lumina chose him. That's not for you to question." Thorne's eyes narrowed, but he backed off, bowing slightly. "As you say, Princess. But I warn you, this will not end well." With that, he and his followers melted into the crowd, leaving a tense silence in their wake. "I'm sorry about that," Lyra said to Aiden, though her expression was troubled. "Thorne comes from an ancient family, one that clings to tradition. He sees any deviation as a threat." Aiden shrugged, trying to diffuse the moment. "I'm used to skepticism. Comes with the territory." Still, the encounter left him uneasy, a reminder that his presence here wasn't universally accepted. That evening, Aiden was invited to a welcoming banquet, held in a grand hall with walls that seemed to glow in time with the music. The food was exotic, its flavors dancing on his tongue, sweet, sour, spicy, all at once. He sat beside Lyra at the head table, fielding questions from dignitaries, each more curious than the last about his world and his bond with Lumina. But as the night wore on, Aiden found himself drawn to Lyra, her intelligence and passion for her people shining through every word. They talked about their cultures, shared stories of their pasts, and found common ground in their sense of duty and adventure. "At heart, we're both explorers," Lyra said, her eyes glinting. "You of the stars, me of the possibilities within our world." Aiden grinned, raising his glass. "To exploration, wherever it leads." As the banquet wound down, Lyra walked him back to his quarters, Lumina trailing behind. The city was quiet now, bathed in the soft glow of bioluminescent plants. "There's something I haven't told you," Lyra said suddenly, her voice low. "An ancient prophecy speaks of a stranger from beyond the stars who would bond with a starbound and usher in a new era for Zorath. I believe that stranger might be you, Aiden." He stopped, turning to her. "A prophecy? That's hard to wrap my head around." "I know," she admitted, "but the signs are there. Lumina's choice, your arrival at this critical time, it all aligns." Aiden glanced at Lumina, who seemed to sense the weight of the moment, its eyes meeting his with that familiar intelligence. "If that's true, then I guess I've got a lot to learn, and fast." Lyra placed a hand on his arm, her touch warm through his sleeve. "You're not alone in this. I'll be with you every step." For a moment, they stood there, the future uncertain but brimming with possibility. Then, with a nod, Aiden followed her into his quarters, ready to face whatever came next. The air in Zorath's capital shimmered with the faint hum of living technology, a pulse that seemed to sync with the city's heartbeat. Aiden Thorne stood on a balcony overlooking the crystalline spires, their surfaces rippling with light under the twin suns. The scent of blooming alien flowers, sharp and sweet, like honeysuckle mixed with iron, filled his lungs, grounding him in this strange world. Lumina sat beside him, its teal fur glowing softly, now nearly as tall as his chest. Its ice-blue eyes scanned the horizon, alert, as if sensing the tension that had been building since their arrival. 2 days had passed since the banquet, and the warm welcome from Princess Lyra was starting to feel like a distant memory. The encounter with Advisor Thorne in the market had been a warning, one Aiden couldn't shake. Whispers of dissent had grown louder, carried on the city's organic streets, and even Lyra's assurances couldn't fully ease the knot in his gut. He was a human on an alien world, bonded to a sacred starbound, a walking challenge to Zorath's traditions. Captain Thorne, Lyra's voice called from behind, pulling him from his thoughts. She stepped onto the balcony, her pearlescent skin catching the sunlight, her violet eyes sharp with urgency. Her armor, fluid and alive, shifted subtly as she moved, the glowing patterns pulsing faster than usual. We've been summoned to the High Council. They want to speak with you about Lumina. Aiden's jaw tightened. Let me guess. They're not thrilled about our bond. Lyra's lips pressed into a thin line. Some see it as a threat, others as an opportunity. But the Council's decision will carry weight. We need to be prepared. He nodded, resting a hand on Lumina's back. The creature let out a low hum, its warmth steadying him. Then let's not keep them waiting. The council chamber was a marvel, carved into the heart of a massive crystal formation that pulsed with inner light. The walls seemed to breathe, their surfaces shifting like liquid glass, and the air carried a faint metallic tang, like ozone after a storm. At the center stood a circular dais, surrounded by 12 Zorathian elders, their robes woven from living fibers that glowed with intricate patterns. Advisor Vorn was among them, his deep green skin stark against his silver robe, his eyes cold and unyielding as they fixed on Aiden. Lyra led Aiden to the dais, her posture regal but tense. Lumina walked at Aiden's side, its presence drawing murmurs from the council. The chamber's acoustics amplified every sound, the rustle of robes, the soft hum of Lumina's fur, the steady beat of Aiden's own heart. Captain Aiden Thorne of Earth, the council's leader, a woman with silver hair and eyes like polished amethyst, began. Her voice was calm, but carried an edge of authority. You stand before us bonded to a starbound, a sacred creature of Zorath. This is unprecedented and, to some, unacceptable. Explain yourself. Aiden took a breath, choosing his words carefully. I found Lumina injured on Aethon. I cared for it, and we formed a bond one can't fully explain. I didn't seek this, but I won't abandon it. Lumina chose me, and I respect that choice. Vorn leaned forward, his voice dripping with disdain. You speak of choice, human, but you do not belong here. The Starbound are ours, tied to our royal line, our traditions. Your presence defiles that legacy. Lyra stepped forward, her voice cutting through the chamber. Advisor Vorn, Lumina's bond with Captain Thorne is not a defilement, but a sign. Our history speaks of change, of outsiders bringing new paths. We cannot ignore this. Vorn's eyes narrowed, but the council leader raised a hand, silencing him. Princess Lyra, your belief in the prophecy is noted, but tradition anchors our people. Captain Thorne, what do you offer Zorath to justify this bond? Aiden met her gaze, his scientist's mind racing. I'm here to learn, to share knowledge. Earth has faced its own challenges. War, environmental collapse, survival. We've developed technologies, strategies, and resilience that could benefit Zorath, especially if you're facing threats. I'm not here to disrupt your traditions, but to work with them. The leader considered this, but Vorn wasn't done. Words, human. You offer nothing but promises. The Starbound must be returned to its rightful place, under our control. Control. Aiden's voice sharpened, his warrior instincts flaring. Lumina is not a tool or a trophy. It's a living being with its own will. You can't force a bond. It chose me, not you. The chamber erupted in murmurs, some approving, others outraged. Lyra shot Aiden a glance, half warning, half admiration. The council leader's expression remained unreadable as she spoke. The bond is undeniable, but its implications are divisive. We will deliberate. Until then, Captain Thorne, you and the Starbound are confined to the guest quarters. Aiden's fists clenched, but Lyra's subtle nod urged restraint. Understood, he said, his voice steady despite the anger simmering beneath. As they left the chamber, the city's vibrant hum felt oppressive, the glowing streets now a maze of unseen threats. Lyra led Aiden and Lumina back to his quarters, her silence heavy. Once inside, she closed the door and turned to him, her eyes blazing. They're scared, she said, her voice low. Vorn and his allies see your bond as a challenge to their power. They'll push to sever it, maybe even by force. Aiden ran a hand through his dark hair, frustration mounting. What's their endgame? Lock Lumina up? Or worse? Lyra hesitated, then nodded. The High Council has methods. They've controlled starbounds before, using neural implants to suppress their will. It's rare, but not unheard of. Aiden's stomach twisted. He looked at Lumina, who sensed his unease and pressed closer, its fur brushing his leg. No way I'm letting that happen. I know, Lyra said, her voice softening. But we're running out of time. Vorn's influence is strong, and the Council's leaning his way. We need to act. Act how? Aiden asked, pacing the room. The quarters were luxurious, living walls, a bed grown from the floor, but they felt like a cage. Lyra's eyes gleamed with determination. There's a sacred site deep in the verdant expanse. It's where starbound bonds are sanctified through a ritual. If we can complete it, your bond with Lumina will be unbreakable, even by the Council's laws. Aiden stopped pacing, his mind racing. Sounds like a plan, but I'm guessing it's not a simple hike. It's not, Lyra admitted. The expanse is wild, filled with predators and unstable terrain. And Vorn's forces will try to stop us. Aiden grinned, a spark of defiance igniting. Good thing I'm not just a scientist. Let's do this. Lyra's smile mirrored his, a mix of resolve and something warmer. Then we move tonight. Pack light and trust Lumina, it'll guide us. Under the cover of Zorath's moonless night, Aiden, Lyra, and Lumina slipped out of the city. The streets, alive with bioluminescent plants, cast eerie shadows as they moved silently, avoiding patrols. Lyra led the way, her armor blending with the surroundings, while Lumina's fur dimmed to a faint glow, its instincts honed for stealth. Aiden carried a compact survival pack, food, water, a plasma pistol, and a portable scanner, his training as a field operative kicking in. The verdant expanse loomed beyond the city, a dense jungle of glowing vines and towering trees, their canopies blocking the starlight. The air grew thick, heavy with the scent of damp earth and flowering moss, and strange, chittering calls echoed through the darkness. Lumina moved ahead, its eyes cutting through the gloom, guiding them with uncanny precision. Stay close, Lyra whispered, her voice barely audible over the jungle's symphony. The expanse is alive, and not all of it is friendly. Aiden nodded, his senses on high alert. He'd faced hostile environments before, deserts, ice worlds, even pirate ambushes, but this felt different, like the jungle itself was watching. They hadn't gone far when Lumina froze, its fur flaring briefly. A low growl rumbled from its throat, and Aiden's hand went to his pistol. What's it sensing? Lyra's eyes narrowed, scanning the shadows. Trouble. Before she could elaborate, a burst of light erupted from the trees, followed by the whine of energy weapons. Zorathian soldiers, clad in sleek, glowing armor, emerged from the undergrowth, their rifles trained on the trio. At their head stood Vorn, his expression triumphant. You thought you could defy the Council, he sneered, his voice carrying over the jungle's din. Surrender the starbound, human, or die here. Aiden's grip tightened on his pistol, but Lyra stepped forward, her voice steady. Vorn, you betray our laws by attacking a guest. Stand down, or face the consequences. Vorn laughed, a harsh sound that grated against the jungle's hum. Your laws are outdated, princess. The Council will thank me when I deliver the starbound. Aiden's mind raced, calculating their odds. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and deep in hostile terrain. But he wasn't about to let Vorn win. Lumina, he whispered, leaning close to the creature. You ready? Lumina's eyes locked onto his, and a surge of understanding passed between them. With a sudden burst of light, it leaped forward, its fur blazing like a beacon. The soldiers flinched, momentarily blinded, and Aiden seized the chance. He fired his pistol, a precise shot that disabled one soldier's weapon, while Lyra drew a curved blade from her armor, its edge humming with energy. Run, she shouted, slashing through a soldier's armor as she charged toward the trees. Aiden sprinted after her, Lumina bounding ahead, its light weaving through the jungle like a guiding star. Energy bolts scorched the air, singeing vines and shattering bark, but Lumina's glow created a disorienting haze, masking their path. The jungle seemed to aid them, vines shifting to block their pursuers, roots rising to trip the soldiers. They ran until the sounds of pursuit faded, collapsing in a small clearing surrounded by glowing ferns. The air was thick with the scent of sap and ozone, the jungle's pulse loud in their ears. Aiden's chest heaved, adrenaline still pumping, but he checked Lumina first, running a hand over its fur. "You okay, buddy?" Lumina hummed softly, unharmed, its eyes bright with trust. Aiden turned to Lyra, who was catching her breath, a thin cut on her arm leaking faint, luminescent blood. "You're hurt," he said, reaching for his medkit. "It's nothing." She brushed him off, but let him clean the wound. Her skin was warm under his touch, and their eyes met, a flicker of something unspoken passing between them. "We can't stay here," Lyra said, breaking the moment. "Thorne won't stop. We need to reach the sacred site before dawn." Aiden nodded, packing away the medkit. "Then let's keep moving. Lumina's got our back." As they rose, Lyra placed a hand on his shoulder, her voice soft but firm. "You fought well back there." Most would have frozen. Aiden shrugged, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "Not my first firefight. Besides, I've got a lot to prove. To you, to Zorath, to myself." Her smile was small but genuine. "You're already proving it." With Lumina leading the way, they plunged deeper into the expanse, the jungle closing around them like a living shield. The path to the sacred site was fraught with danger, but Aiden felt a fire kindling inside him, a human determination to protect what mattered, no matter the odds. The verdant expanse pulsed with life, its bioluminescent vines casting an ethereal glow across the jungle floor. The air was thick with the scent of damp moss and blooming orchids, their petals shimmering like liquid starlight. Aiden Thorne crouched beside a glowing fern, his breath steady despite the ache in his muscles from hours of running. Lumina, its teal fur now a beacon in the darkness, stood watch nearby, its ice-blue eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of Vorn's soldiers. Princess Lyra knelt a few feet away, her pearlescent skin faintly luminous under the jungle's light, her violet eyes focused as she studied a holographic map projected from her wrist device. The cut on her arm, bandaged by Aiden's medkit, was a stark reminder of how close they'd come to capture. "We're almost there," Lyra whispered, her voice barely audible over the jungle's symphony of chirps and rustling leaves. "The sacred site is just beyond the next ridge. If we can reach it before dawn, we'll have enough time for the ritual." Aiden nodded, wiping sweat from his brow. His plasma pistol rested heavy in its holster, a comfort after their skirmish with Vorn's forces. "In this ritual, it'll lock in my bond with Lumina? Make it so the council can't touch us." Lyra's gaze met his, steady but laced with urgency. "Yes, the rite of binding is ancient, tied to Zorath's core. Once completed, your bond will be sacred beyond their authority. But it's not simple. The ritual tests both partners, physically, mentally, emotionally. You'll need to trust Lumina completely." Aiden glanced at Lumina, who tilted its head as if sensing his thoughts. A faint hum vibrated from its throat, a reassurance that felt like a hand on his shoulder. "Trust isn't the issue," he said, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "It's the physically and mentally part I'm wondering about." Lyra's smile was brief but warm, a flicker of light in the tension. "You've made it this far, Aiden. I believe in you, both of you." He held her gaze a moment longer than necessary, the jungle's glow softening the edges of her face. Something unspoken passed between them, a connection growing stronger with every shared danger. But there was no time to dwell on it. Dawn was approaching, and Vorn's soldiers wouldn't be far behind. "Let's move," Aiden said, rising to his feet. Lumina took the lead, its glowing fur weaving a path through the dense undergrowth, and Lyra fell in a step beside him, her living armor whispering as it adjusted to her movements. The sacred site was a marvel, hidden in a crater-like basin surrounded by towering crystal trees, their branches refracting light into a kaleidoscope of colors. The ground was smooth, almost glass-like, etched with intricate patterns that pulsed faintly, as if Zorath itself was alive beneath their feet. At the center stood a circular platform, its surface carved with runes that glowed with an inner fire. The air here was different, cleaner, charged with a metallic tang that tingled on Aiden's tongue, like standing near a thunderstorm. "This is it," Lyra said, her voice reverent. "The heart of Zorath, where starbounds and their companions become one." Aiden stepped onto the platform, Lumina at his side. The runes flared brighter, responding to their presence, and a low hum vibrated through the ground, resonating in his chest. "So, what do we do?" he asked, his scientist's curiosity warring with the weight of the moment. Lyra moved to the platform's edge, her fingers tracing the runes. "The ritual has 3 phases. First, the trial of strength. You and Lumina must face a physical challenge together. Second, the trial of mind. You'll share memories, confront truths. Finally, the trial of heart. You'll forge the bond, but it requires complete vulnerability. If you falter at any point, the ritual fails." Aiden's jaw tightened. "No pressure, then." Lyra's eyes softened. "I'll be here, guiding you as much as I can. But this is your journey, Aiden. Yours and Lumina's." He nodded, turning to Lumina. "Ready, buddy?" Lumina's eyes locked onto his, and a surge of warmth flooded his mind. Not words, but a feeling of absolute trust. It was ready. So was he. Lyra stepped back, raising her hands. "Begin." The platform shuddered, and the runes blazed, bathing the basin in light. The ground beneath Aiden and Lumina shifted, splitting open to reveal a labyrinth of glowing tunnels below. A gust of wind carried the scent of wet stone and something ancient, like dust from a forgotten tomb. "Trial of strength," Lyra called, her voice echoing. "Survive the labyrinth. Together." Aiden didn't hesitate. He leaped into the tunnel, Lumina bounding ahead, its fur illuminating the narrow passage. The walls were slick, carved from a material that pulsed like a heartbeat, and the air grew heavy, pressing against his lungs. His boots echoed on the stone, the sound sharp against the low hum of the labyrinth. The first challenge came quickly. A massive creature, its body a tangle of glowing vines and razor-sharp thorns, lunged from a side passage. Its roar shook the tunnel, a sound like grinding metal, and its eyes burned with primal fury. Aiden drew his pistol, but Lumina was faster. It darted forward, its fur flaring like a supernova, and unleashed a pulse of light that stunned the creature, sending it reeling. "Nice one," Aiden shouted, firing a shot that scorched the beast's flank. Together, they moved in sync, Lumina disorienting the creature with bursts of light, Aiden landing precise shots to drive it back. The beast finally retreated, its roars fading into the distance. Aiden caught his breath, grinning at Lumina. "We make a hell of a team." But the labyrinth wasn't done. The tunnels shifted, walls closing in, forcing them to crawl through tight spaces or leap over sudden chasms. Lumina's agility guided them, its light revealing hidden paths, while Aiden's training kept him focused, his body moving on instinct. By the time they emerged back onto the platform, sweat soaked his shirt and his muscles burned, but they were unharmed. Lyra's voice rang out, steady and clear. Trial of strength passed. Now the trial of mind. The platform glowed brighter, and a wave of energy enveloped Aiden and Lumina. His vision blurred, and, suddenly, he was no longer in the basin. He stood in a memory, his own vivid and raw. He was a boy on Earth, watching his father, a soldier, leave for a war he'd never returned from. The pain of loss hit him like a punch, followed by the drive that had pushed him to become a scientist and a warrior to honor his father's sacrifice. Then the scene shifted, and he was in Lumina's memories, a world of light and sound, where starbounds roamed free, their bonds with Zorathians pure and untainted. But there were shadows, too, starbounds caged, their wills broken by neural implants, their glow dimmed. The sorrow was overwhelming, and Aiden felt Lumina's resolve to be free, to choose its own path. Tears stung his eyes as the memories faded, leaving him back on the platform. Lumina pressed against him, its hum a soft comfort. "I saw you," Aiden whispered. "I understand now." Lyra's voice broke through, softer now. "Trial of mind passed. Prepare for the trial of heart." The platform's light intensified, wrapping Aiden and Lumina in a cocoon of warmth. Aiden's pulse quickened as he felt Lumina's presence in his mind. Not just memories, but its essence, its soul. It was vast, ancient, yet fiercely loyal, a partner that saw him as he was, flaws, fears, and all, and chose him anyway. "Open yourself," Lyra instructed, her voice distant but firm. "Let the bond form." Aiden closed his eyes, letting go of doubt, of fear. He poured his trust into Lumina, offering everything, his courage, his grief, his hope. In return, he felt Lumina's strength, its light, its unwavering faith in him. The connection deepened, a bridge between human and starbound, unbreakable and eternal. But then a vision hit him, a swarm of dark, writhing shapes, their forms shifting like smoke, their hunger a palpable force. Shadow swarm. The words echoed in his mind, a threat older than Zorath itself, one the starbounds were born to fight. The vision showed caged starbounds, their light stolen, unable to protect their world. Aiden's heart clenched as he realized the Council's control had weakened Zorath, leaving it vulnerable. The light faded, and Aiden opened his eyes, gasping. Lumina stood tall, its fur blazing, its eyes fierce with purpose. The platform's runes dimmed, the ritual complete. Lyra rushed forward, her face alight with awe. "You did it. The bond is sealed." Aiden's legs wobbled, but he steadied himself, a grin breaking through. That was intense. Lyra's laugh was soft, her hand brushing his arm. "You faced the heart of Zorath and came out stronger." Not many could. Before Aiden could respond, Lumina let out a piercing cry, its fur flaring. The ground trembled, and shouts echoed from the jungle's edge. Vorn's soldiers had found them, their energy rifles glinting in the dawnlight. "They're here," Lyra hissed, drawing her blade. "The ritual's done, but we're not safe yet." Aiden's hand went to his pistol, his warrior instincts kicking in. "Then we fight our way out." As the soldiers charged, Lumina roared, its light pulsing in sync with Aiden's heartbeat. The bond was complete, but the battle for Zorath was just beginning. The dawn light filtered through the verdant expanse, painting the crystalline trees in hues of gold and violet. The air was cool, carrying the earthy scent of damp soil and the faint sweetness of blooming vines, but the tranquility felt fragile, like a held breath. Aiden Thorne stood at the edge of the sacred site, his boots scuffed and his plasma pistol still warm from the skirmish with Vorn soldiers. Lumina, its teal fur glowing with renewed intensity, stood tall beside him, its ice-blue eyes scanning the jungle for threats. Princess Lyra, her pearlescent skin streaked with dirt and her living armor dented, gripped her humming blade, her violet eyes fierce despite the exhaustion etching her face. The rite of binding had sealed Aiden's bond with Lumina, but Vorn's forces were closing in, and the revelation of the shadow swarm loomed like a storm on the horizon. "We can't stay here," Lyra said, her voice steady but urgent. "The Council will send more troops. We need to get back to the city and rally support before Vorn spins this against us." Aiden nodded, holstering his pistol. His muscles ached, and his mind still reeled from the ritual's visions, the shadow swarm, a writhing mass of darkness threatening Zorath, and the caged starbounds, their light stolen by the Council's neural implants. The bond with Lumina thrummed in his chest, a steady pulse of strength and purpose. "If we can expose what the Council's done to the starbounds, we might turn the tide," he said. "The people need to know." Lyra's lips curved into a determined smile. "Exactly. The truth is our weapon now. Let's move." Lumina took the lead, its glowing fur cutting through the jungle's shadows like a beacon. Aiden and Lyra followed, their steps quick but cautious, the jungle's hum masking the distant sounds of pursuit. The path back to the city was treacherous, with roots that seemed to shift underfoot and vines that whispered as they brushed past. The air grew heavier, thick with the scent of ozone, as if Zorath itself sensed the coming conflict. The city's organic streets glowed softly under the twin suns, but the atmosphere was tense, the usual harmony disrupted by murmurs of unrest. As Aiden, Lyra, and Lumina emerged from the expanse, a crowd gathered, their green and silver-skinned faces a mix of curiosity and suspicion. Word of the ritual had spread, fueled by Vorn's propaganda, and the air buzzed with whispered questions. A human bonded to a starbound? Blasphemy or destiny? Lyra led them straight to the Grand Forum, a massive amphitheater carved from living crystal, its walls amplifying every sound. The High Council was already assembled, Vorn at their center, his deep green skin stark against his silver robe. His eyes gleamed with triumph as he addressed the crowd, his voice booming. This human has defiled our sacred traditions. He and his stolen starbound must be purged to restore Zorath's balance. The crowd stirred, some shouting agreement, others hesitating. Aiden's jaw clenched, but Lyra stepped forward, her presence commanding silence. Advisor Vorn speaks of tradition, but he hides the truth, she declared, her voice ringing clear. The council has caged starbounds, using neural implants to control them, weakening our world against the shadow swarm. A threat they've kept secret. Gasps rippled through the crowd, and Vorn's face twisted in fury. Lies! The princess is corrupted by this outsider. Aiden knew it was now or never. He stepped beside Lyra, Lumina at his side, its fur blazing like a star. "I'm no Zorathian," he said, his voice steady, carrying the weight of his human resolve. "But I've seen the shadow swarm in the ritual's visions. They're coming, and the starbounds are your defense, our defense. The council's been breaking their spirits, not protecting them. Lumina chose me, a human, because it sensed the truth. We're stronger together." Lumina let out a resonant hum, its light pulsing in sync with Aiden's words. The crowd fell silent, their eyes wide as the starbound's glow illuminated the forum. Then, from the shadows, other starbounds emerged. Massive, their fur in every shade of the spectrum, their eyes fierce with newfound freedom. The ritual had done more than seal Aiden's bond. It had shattered the council's implants, releasing the caged starbounds across Zorath. The crowd erupted, some cheering, others shouting in fear, but the tide was turning. A young Zorathian woman, her silver hair braided with glowing threads, stepped forward, her voice trembling but clear. "The starbounds are free. The prophecy is true. The outsider brings a new era." Vorn's face paled, his authority crumbling. "Seize them," he bellowed, but the council's guards hesitated, their loyalty shaken. Lyra seized the moment, raising her blade. "People of Zorath, choose now. Stand with tradition that binds us, or with freedom that strengthens us." The crowd surged forward, not in violence, but in unity, surrounding the council's dais. Vorn's soldiers lowered their weapons, outnumbered and outmatched by the will of the people. The council leader, her amethyst eyes weary, raised a hand for silence. "Enough," she said, her voice heavy. "The starbounds have spoken. The human's bond is true. Advisor Vorn, you will answer for your actions." Guards moved to restrain Vorn, who spat curses as he was led away. The crowd's cheers grew louder, a wave of hope washing over the forum. Aiden felt Lyra's hand brush his, a fleeting touch that grounded him in the chaos. "You did it," she whispered, her eyes shining. "We did it," he corrected, grinning. Lumina nudged his leg, its hum a warm echo of their shared triumph. In the days that followed, Zorath transformed. The High Council, humbled by the uprising, agreed to reforms, dismantling the neural implant program and restoring the starbound's freedom. New laws allowed starbounds to choose their companions, royal or not, sparking a cultural shift that echoed the prophecy. Schools opened to study human technology, and Aiden shared Earth's advancements in energy and defense, strengthening Zorath against the Shadow Swarm. The city buzzed with renewed energy, its streets alive with music and art celebrating the new era. Aiden and Lyra worked side by side, their partnership a bridge between worlds. They oversaw the creation of a joint Earth-Zorath task force, blending human ingenuity with Zorathian mysticism to prepare for the swarm's inevitable arrival. Lumina, now a towering presence, led the free starbounds, its bond with Aiden a symbol of unity. One evening, as the twin suns set, casting the city in a warm amber glow, Aiden and Lyra stood on a cliff overlooking the capital. The air was fragrant with night-blooming flowers, their petals unfurling like tiny lanterns. Lumina rested nearby, its fur a soft glow against the darkening sky, its eyes calm but vigilant. "We've come a long way," Aiden said, his voice quiet. "From a storm on Aethon to this." Lyra turned to him, her silver hair catching the last rays of sunlight. "You've changed everything, Aiden. Not just for Zorath, but for me. I never thought I'd find a partner who sees the world the way I do." He met her gaze, his heart quickening. The attraction that had simmered since their first meeting was undeniable now, but it was more than physical, a shared purpose, a mutual respect. "I didn't expect this either," he admitted, "but I'm glad I'm here. With you." Her smile was radiant, and she stepped closer, her hand finding his. "The Shadow Swarm is coming, and it won't be easy. But together, human, Zorathian, starbound, we'll face it." Aiden squeezed her hand, feeling the warmth of her skin, the strength in her grip. "Together," he echoed, his voice firm. Lumina let out a low, resonant hum, its light flaring briefly as if in agreement. The city below sparkled, a testament to what they'd built, and the stars above burned bright, a reminder of the challenges ahead. Aiden felt the weight of the future, but also its promise, a chance to forge something greater, not just for Zorath, but for all who dared to reach beyond their world. As they stood there, hand in hand, the jungle's hum blended with the city's pulse, a song of hope and defiance. The Shadow Swarm was out there, a darkness waiting to test them, but Aiden knew they were ready. With Lumina's light, Lyra's fire, and his own human grit, they'd face whatever came, and they'd win.